Hello, everyone. This is Ronnie. Let's talk about more fat in a raw vegan diet. Sometimes you'll see people that say that they have tried a low fat raw vegan diet. They've tried maybe a fruitarian diet, but they do better with more fat in their diet. Have you seen people talk about that? So some people say 80-10-10. It's not quite right for them. They want to eat a higher level of fat. So let's talk about that a little bit. The um, Fat is of I don't know how much I need to go into this, but fat is a macronutrient, part of our diet that we take calories from, which are basic source of fuel. And calories are by far the most important nutrient for all animals because without calories, without something that we can turn into fuel for the body, then we die because that's what we need. We need to replace our energy every day. We expend more energy than we're able to create just from breathing and being alive. So we have to bring in some more, and animals do that by going out into the world and moving around. Dissimilar to plants and other things, we move physically into the world and take advantage of biological living materials around us, which we use to convert into our own living frame and body and all that. So that's obviously pretty obvious, I guess, that that's what we do. And in doing that, we have to do that. Animals have to do that. Now, a lot of people, say, breatharians and stuff, will maybe deny that, but this is what every single animal does. This is why we are. This is why we move around. This is why we have a digestive tract. This is why we have highly attuned senses towards finding food and identifying food and tasting food and so on. And there's not a lot much more to us than a digestive system and, and senses that are basically mostly aligned towards survival, finding food, and sexual reproduction and social stuff with our species. There's not a lot more going on, in a human body in a sense. When people say, diet isn't all that important, it's like, what else is there? What else do animals do? They go out and get food all day. That's what they do. And there's so much eating disordery type of behavior that people aren't uncomfortable with the fact that food is a big topic and food is important and all that stuff. Anyway, the raw food diet, every animal in the world eats a raw food diet, every single animal in the world, because that's essential. Very animals can't cook, animals can't control heat and temperature and fire and all that stuff. It doesn't mean they eat a cold diet, it means they eat a raw diet, and that diet is food that's unprocessed, uncooked, apart from by their own bodies, by their own hands. They process it with their teeth, their saliva, the enzymes in their body, and all of that stuff. And that's sufficient for every single animal. For many human beings, they reckon that's not sufficient for them. So they have to blast the food with incredibly high levels of heat to break it down into mush and then make it vaguely edible and add other things to it to make it vaguely digestible and tasty. And that's how a lot of people are eating. The primates that are most like us, they're eating mostly fruits, largely fruits and vegetables, which is kind of boring for for science and for the television shows and the TV presenters. So they follow these animals around for many, many years at a time, desperately waiting for them to eat some meat or something else other than fruits and vegetables, which is very boring. And eventually they do, and they make a big deal about the fact that these animals, once in a blue moon, eat something other than fruit. But they're eating mostly fruit, vegetation. Fruit is the number one choice. Might not always be available to them, but fruit is the number one choice, and leaves and things like that are come after that in vegetation. We look very much like these animals. We don't want to believe that we do, but we do, and certainly in the inside we do. We don't necessarily look like chimpanzees, which is ironically, which is one of our closest, but in terms of our digestive system, we're more similar to those that are more fruitivorous, fruit eating, more exclusive fruit eating. Bonobos are a little bit more exclusive fruit eating. and orangutans and things like that. I would say though that all of those all still eat other things. That doesn't mean that they don't eat other things. These are animals trying to survive in nature with no ability to control their environment. So they do eat other things, but they are highly, highly evolved and instinctively guided to find fruit, to eat fruit, to store fruit, to do whatever they can to eat the fruit. So this is a basic review of the human diet, that we should be eating more like them, and most likely, definitely up to the point that we were cooking, we have been eating mostly like these other animals. We would have probably been even better at it than these animals, because we would have had better ability to control an environment, to guard an environment. People might think that a human would not be able to fight a chimpanzee or an orangutan, and you're probably right about that. But a group of human beings will always dominate any group of other animals. And firstly, human beings have the great advantage of being able to create weapons very quickly, pick up rocks, pick up sticks, pick up other things. We can whack these animals with people thinking about, oh, dogs and things. I don't know. Give me a baseball bat. I kind of feel like I'm going to be okay against the dog. You tell me. But I'm kind of thinking in nature, I can pick up a pretty big stick. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think I can pick up a stick and whack things in the face and in the head. Um, maybe that's being a bit arrogant, but I think that's one way we would have defended ourselves. But if you've got enough human beings with enough sticks and enough rocks and stuff, the other animals aren't really going to stand a chance a lot of the time. So, we would have been able to probably defend our environment and dominate those other animals to some degree. Maybe we didn't, but I think we would have done well as fruit eaters. Anyway, different conversation. And their diet is, because it's mostly fruit and leaves, is almost guaranteed to be an 8 to 10 style diet in terms of the amount of fat in the diet, because by far the most fruit and the most vegetables are not high in fat. They're not high in fat. They're low in fat, or their correct level of fat for us. That's another thing we need to change the way we talk about that, because people say, I'll eat a low fat diet. I didn't eat any fat today. It's like, yeah, you did. You did eat fat. You do eat a appropriate amount of fat diet. And I think Don Bennett talked about that, an appropriate amount of fat. And, we need to stop using these phrases like low fat diet, because it's triggering this idea like, I'm not eating any fat, when you're eating an appropriate level of fat. A few things to know about fat. Omega-6 and omega-3 are the ones that are essential for us, and we create other fats from that we use in our body. But people will say, well, we need to get more omega-3. They use supplements. Maybe they start eating other foods to get enough fats. They're worried about the fact that their brain is made out of fat and all of this stuff. The amount of omega-3 and omega-6 that we need is not exactly known. From what I researched, now you'll find numbers if you go in Chronometer and you look in books, but if you actually look a little deeper into it, as far as I can see, it is admitted that they don't really know how much we actually need on the lower end or on the higher end. In other words, they don't know what's too much, they don't know what's too little. So what is the number that we're meant to try and hit? It is a number at which we can be confident that the majority of the population is not deficient. That's the way that they calculate that number. What is that number? It's basically just the average across the population. So that number that people are trying to hit in terms of omega-3, omega-6 and all that is basically the average across the population. It's not the limit beyond which you'll be suffering deficiency. Not at all. And it's likely that the amount that we need is far less. It's very likely. And they've probably increased that number as well just to take in the people that are quite bad at utilizing and digesting fats, you know. So these numbers are rarely very accurate and probably won't be accurate for a raw vegan. If you go out into nature, what options of fat do you have to eat? Other animals. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. What about insects? Probably not a shred of fat on those most of the time. I don't know, slugs, snails, disgusting things. Animals really difficult to catch, but obviously animal bodies are a source of fat. But many of them are way leaner as well. A lot of very lean meats, as they would call it. So not as high a source of fat. But then you would come to nuts, seeds, as being an obvious source. And I think that these would have always been part of our diet and always part of an animal's diet. But nuts, as far as I'm aware, are way less common than fruit in terms of how available they are throughout the year. We look at fruit sometimes from a northern climate perspective, which is that fruit is around once a year for a short period of time. But that's not what it's like in the tropics. The fruit is around throughout the year. Trees will sprout fruit multiple times a year. There are some trees that fruit 4 times a year. So fruit is around throughout the year. And nuts, I believe, are less common. Fatty fruits are very uncommon. And fatty fruits are things that really have been domesticated mostly, more so than the sugary fruits, which is not uncommon to find sugary fruits in nature, in a completely un. Otherwise, what do you think apes eat? How do you think a gorilla keeps its size up? How do you think that any of these, like, they need calories? Calories is sugar. They need sugary fruits. They go towards sugar. So they certainly do eat nuts and things like that, but it won't be as big a part of their diet. A consistent part of their diet will be the fruits and the vegetables, but really the fruits. We're talking fruits, vegetables. You know, like that's the way you should think about it. Some people want to say vegetables, fruits. No, no, no. Fruits and vegetables. Yeah, not really essential. I don't think they're really all that essential, but sure. If you enjoy them and stuff. Um, so these foods are not particularly high in fat, and these animals' diets are not particularly high in fat, as far as I'm aware. Feel free to tell me I'm wrong. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be times where they can eat a lot of fat, times where there's a lot of nuts, but then nuts are difficult to eat as well in their natural state. People forget that. They need to be broken open, they need to be processed, they're quite cumbersome, they're quite complicated to eat. You know, it's not as easy as just buying a bag full. So it's a little bit more difficult to eat nuts. Seeds, um, not sure about the harvesting of seeds all that much, but I guess he would have eaten some seeds. I guess so. But my impression is that in nature, the ability to eat huge volumes of fat is very limited. Is very limited, and the amount of fatty fruits and things like that's limited. Even things like avocados, they come from South America rather than from Africa, where humans would have originally come from. Durian, a fruit from from Asia, is higher in fat, but it's nowhere near an avocado, you know. And there's very, very few fruits that are a higher fat fruit. There's not that many at all in comparison to the ones that aren't. So our diet would have always had to have been something pretty low fat. In terms of even the more modern diets were based on generally carbohydrates, and the fats were a smaller part of the diet. They were a more limited part of the diet. Now, one thing we would have had is our mother's milk. Mother's milk has a lot of fat in it, has a high degree of fat in it. So that's one time that we would have had a lot of fat, and that's for one particular time in our life. When we're growing rapidly, we need a lot of calories and stuff like that. So definitely with babies and children, perhaps, they would go towards a bit more mother's milk. But as we get into adulthood, we would adjust to eating, to not having mother's milk, to having the foods that were around us that the other adults ate. When it comes to what do we see information wise about fat in the diet, well, what Dr. Doug Graham's always said, and I've never found the exact research for this, but I think he gets this from sports science, which is that as the amount of fat in a person's diet goes over 10% of total calories, as it starts to rise above 10% of total calories, that your ability to process and assimilate and digest sugar goes down, and your ability to bring in oxygen goes down, and that measurable health declines start to occur. And performance goes down. I think that's probably related to sports science. If you look at the Tour de France cyclists, very demanding sport, when they're out cycling, they're drinking fruit juice with sugar in it. That's basically what they're doing. A lot of sports athletes on the court, whatever, they're eating fruit, they're drinking sports drinks, just low fat carbs. Even a lot of people who do keto diets, when they do running, when they do sports, they're taking in carbohydrates. They have to function at their best. So human performance seems to be linked up with high carbohydrate diet, or appropriate level of carbohydrate diet, low level of fat diet. Okay, so human performance from that side. Then human disease and illness and sickness. What we seem to be finding is that diets that are higher in fat are connected with disease, particularly with heart disease, which has been connected for a long time with the high saturated fat diet that is common across our society. It looks like that high saturated fat diet is also a link with blood pressure, with diabetes, and many other diseases. The longest living people in the world, the blue zones, they were all on a high carbohydrate, plant-based, mostly vegetarian diet. One great example is Loma Linda, the people of California who are from the Seventh-day Adventist religion, a religion that is very vegetarian-based, vegan-based. Many are vegan. And they're the longest living population in the US, the healthiest population in the US, and they've been studied for this. It's a high carbohydrate, low fat diet, once again. So over and over and over, we're seeing really good evidence towards this. In the raw food world, what we found over the years is that people tried endless ways of doing this diet and failed. And over, they were doing diets that were inevitably really high in fat. They were trying to use nuts and seeds and things like that to create foods that mimicked cooked foods. They were trying to get this heavy feeling, this dry, heavy feeling from these foods, which you can kind of accomplish a little bit. But people didn't feel good in that long term, and people couldn't sustain that long term, and no one feels good on a high fat diet long term. No one. No one sustains that. No one sustains the swings in blood sugar that it leads to, the ups and downs, and it causes damage to people. It's way harder to digest. And you have to run it through your bloodstream, and there's evidence of people eating high fat meals and their bloodstream just slows down and clogs and sludges. This is all very clear information. That doesn't stop people from eating a high-fat diet and from enjoying it and from wanting to eat these foods. But this is what we've seen. And one of the big steps ahead with the raw food movement was the 80-10-10 diet. It was Dr. Douglas Graham coming out with this program and saying, really, we're not eating enough fruit. We need to eat more fruit, more carbohydrate. And goes in line with all the other things the vegan and plant-based doctors are telling us, and we're just doing a raw version of it. And many people started to implement it. It started to work for many people, and it's still a growing movement and a growing idea. So, with all that being said, why is it that there are still raw foodists that are like, yeah, that 80-10-10 thing doesn't work for me. I want to eat a higher fat diet. Partly, I think, just because of flavor, because they enjoy eating avocados to abundance. You know, if you're to follow strict 80-10-10, avocado a day is too much. That's the truth of it. One avocado a day is probably too much. So, for most people. But who wants to limit that? People want to have an avocado, 2 avocados, 3 avocados. So they like the flavour of it, like the taste of it. And maybe it's easier to eat less food. People like that idea. Someone said to me recently they stopped doing a raw vegan diet. They were just like, I couldn't make sense of how much food I had to eat. You know, and that is a big deal for people, but it's kind of an eating disordery feeling as well. It's like, I don't want to eat a lot of food. I'm going to get fat. So people are like, they're crazy with these things. So what are the mistakes people are making that leads them to do this? So people go, well, I started to add more fat to my diet and I felt better. I felt more this, I felt more that, I felt more this. It's inevitably that they were just eating enough calories. They were under eating before and now they're eating enough. That's it. It takes a while to learn to eat enough calories, 80-10-10, and hold your weight. There's many people that can't and don't do that. And people come into the fruitarian movement for a while, they don't listen to any of us. They go off, I don't know, to Thailand, off to Terra Frutis, off somewhere, Ecuador, whatever. They get ridiculously skinny. They're trying to live off the sunlight. And then they're like, yeah, that fruitarian diet didn't work for me. It's full of crazy people. I've seen people in comment sections and stuff doing this. It's full of crazy people that are saying crazy things. No, we were all telling you to eat enough calories. We were telling you the vital information, the simple information. You were going down eating disorder, breatharianism route. That's not a raw vegan diet, a frugivore diet. That's not how primates eat. That's not how our cousins, the primates, eat. They're not trying to live off the sunlight. They're stealing your food from you. they're nasty guys. They're stealing food from people all the time. They're always eating food. They're always going after food. Sorry for the people that have the eating disorders that this is triggering. I'm sure there's some of you watching. Sorry if this triggers you, but the animals, the primates, are always eating food. I want you to imagine that. Always food going in, all day long eating food. I know that triggers you. I know that's a horrible idea for you, but it's time to move past your disease. Animals are going out and eating food all the time with no judgment, with no fear, with no anxiety. They don't worry about what other people think of them. They're not thinking, oh my God, are they judging me? Are they thinking I'm eating too much? Oh my God, am I going to put on weight? Are they going to judge me? That's not how animals eat. That's your mindset. That's a invented human idea. So, you know, I met a guy one time and he wasn't eating enough fruit. We were at an event together. He wasn't eating enough fruit. And talked to him about it a little bit. I never, brought it up too much with him, but I could see he was doing that. And I talked to him a little bit about it, and he brought up the fact that he felt this kind of guilt or shame when he ate too much. This is why people fail on this diet, things like that. I don't realize that people have this guilt or shame about eating too much, and they eat a lot, and then they feel like, they feel this guilt, this shame about it. You need to move way beyond that to be healthy in life. You can't have that kind of attitude towards food. And wherever that's come from, those anxieties, those fears need to go. And potentially I can help you work through that, if you want to get in touch. But sure, other people can help you as well. So people don't eat enough. Then when they add fat into their diet, all of a sudden they're eating enough. It's not ideal, but it's better to eat enough than to eat too little all the time. And you can eat a little bit too little, you'll be okay, you'll just lose weight, and that's fine. But at some stage, when you eat too little, you go into a phase of like you just don't feel good. And you want to eat anything, and you've got no energy, and you know you don't want to do anything, and you start to feel depressed and anxious, and you're a bit concerned about all the people, and you're thinking all the world's crashing in on you, and it's all connected with not eating enough. That's it. It's so simple sometimes that people don't want to do it. Sometimes the simple answer is the blindingly right answer, but people don't want to take it sometimes because they don't feel like they want to eat more, and they maybe have this guilt and shame stuff about eating more. It's like you just need to eat a bit more. You need to eat enough. And this, like, I saw a guy who commented to this thing, so I thought, I think I know that guy. He's saying like that fruitarian was diet was bad, and I'm pretty sure people told me about him and said, "Oh yeah, this guy, we really worried about him. He wasn't eating, and he was like, like kept on fasting." And this guy's like, "Yeah, the fruitarian diet doesn't work." It's like you didn't work. Like you didn't even eat the diet. That's not doing a raw vegan diet. There's too many people that come into this and end up on a whole fasting, breatharian, juice fasting. They never do the diet ever. And then they never do 80-10-10 ever. They never eat like the way that Doug eats, Grant Campbell, um, Fully Christina, all these people that have done something like an 80-10-10 diet for a while. So it's volume, quantity of food is an important factor of it. Okay, so that's an important point for me, I suppose. Um, what else do I want to say about this fat thing? Yeah, that's a big thing though. That people think they're not getting something in their diet. They're just not eating enough calories, and then they add more fat, and it's like, oh, I added fat, and now I can, now my brain's working. That's what it feels like when you eat enough food. That's what it feels like. But people aren't in touch with their body enough, aren't in touch with their hunger mechanisms enough on a raw vegan side to understand what's going on. So they just assume, I'm not getting enough nutrients. And then loads of people tell them you're not getting enough nutrients and they buy into it. And then they go back to a world of cooked food. And then they feel balanced because they're suddenly eating enough calories. Then they put on weight and then they hate themselves. And then they think they keep on blaming the raw vegan world and I don't know, whatever. Not always. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes it happens. So, uh, raw vegan promoters and stuff, or raw vegan influencers, maybe to seem different and to seem like they've got a different message, they want to say that they're doing their own thing. Even though entirely they learned how to do this from pretty much 80-10-10, but they want to act like they've worked this out. They've got their own thing. They're figuring out their own path. Why? Maybe because they want to share something different with their followers, something unique. They want to be the source of all knowledge. And they don't want to just go, oh yes, well that book 80-10-10, that's what it's all about. Because that's kind of what it is, It's very simple. There's more stuff you can add to that, but as a base level, the 80-10-10 concept is the way to eat, to do a raw vegan diet. That is the way to do it, as far as I can ever work out. And in my own and just from my personal experience, which is just personal experience, every experiment of eating a higher fat diet is never better. For me now, if I eat higher fat, I'll put on weight. If I eat higher fat, I'll feel it in many different ways. I will feel the uncomfortableness of it. I want to feel like me, more of the time. I don't like foods that bring me out of myself or don't make me feel right and things like that. So I want to watch out. I've never been that bad with digesting fat, but some people are very bad with digesting fat. It's very uncomfortable for them. So that's another issue. But it's never a great experiment. I remember there was a time when I was eating a lot of tahini, and I cut the tahini out, and it was night and day difference. I couldn't believe the difference of how much better I felt, how much clearer, how much steadier I felt. Just high fat, higher fats isn't a solution. And when people say I eat 20% fat, it's very hard to control these numbers. And if you could accurately actually see what they ate, it would probably be higher than that. It's hard to limit that. As soon as you start adding fats to your diet, you'd add in a lot of calories immediately. You can't just eat like a bag of nuts a day and think that's 20% fat. That's not. That's getting up to 50% of your calories. That's why so many raw foodists were so high in fat in their diet. When Doug Graham would talk to people and he would work out, their diet was 50%, 70% fat. And to this day, there's still raw foodists that are trying to like downgrade fruit and say fat's the answer. It's just really silly. Anyway, that's my answer when it comes to all this fat stuff. If you've got any questions or comments, put them below. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, message, and check out UK Fruit Fest, fruitfest.co.uk.